It's all about kind of just adding new creative things into it and planning it out a little bit so that you two are looking forward to it. Hey, I found an article on like, look, they said that if we do this position, so you're planning and anticipating, so everybody's kind of looking forward to it instead of like dreading it.
No. I'm like, okay, if you're going to send that in a text, make sure that you're double checking that that's to your partner.
That's right.
My guest today, we go way back, okay? She commuted back and forth from her medical practice to Gary, Indiana, to Hollywood, California, while she served as a co-host on the Emmy Award-winning talk show The Doctors for 3 consecutive seasons. And as a sexologist, she is considered a pioneer of groundbreaking discussions about relationships, sex, abstinence, HIV/AIDS prevention, and vaccine safety. Please welcome Dr. Rachael Ross. Hey, Dr. Rachael.
Erica, we go way back, so this is such a pleasure.
I did solicit some questions from my comeback community, so I want to make sure that we get to some of those. So I am we're going to get back to our radio roots, and so you can answer some questions.
Yay, I love it. My favorite.
All right, here we go.
Dr. Rachael, okay, this is Bree. I've always had a type that I was sexually attracted to, and I feel kind of crazy saying this, but they all kind of look like the man that sexually assaulted me. Is this a common thing?
Wow, that's a very common thing. And you know what? I want to say that I applaud you for even having this conversation and being astute enough to even recognize the conversation. Because what a lot of people do is they are kind of what we call re-traumatizing themselves. So what they do is when they were a victim, they kind of put themselves in situations where they re-victimize themselves all of the time, over and over and over again. And when this becomes a safe space for you is when you can, either with the help of a therapist or a coach, recognize that that's the tendency, but find something comparable in a safe space. So for instance, say somebody has been victimized and they've been orally assaulted. And so what in some women and men happens is that now there's this titillation or excitement associated with oral sexual assault, right? So then they gravitate maybe towards a rougher oral sex, and it becomes this huge turn on. What happens for most of us and a lot of us is we feel guilt, extreme guilt around finding a pleasurable spot in something that caused us so much pain and trauma. And so what becomes the struggle is removing the guilt associated with that thought and that feeling, and just realizing that it is what it is, and finding a safe space where you can have that. So for her, it'd be like finding the guy who maybe looks similar to the person who assaulted her, but is kind and would never assault her again. For someone who finds that type of passion and turn on from a position maybe that they've been sexually assaulted in, it's forgiving themselves for feeling that and for feeling turned on, and recognizing that that's something that every victim goes through most of the time, and proceeding in a safe way and in a safe environment with someone you trust, so that you can actually feel comfortable exploiting that turn on that feels so icky at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, honestly, I'm a little shocked by the answer, because I thought, like, my immediate thought was maybe it's a way to take control back from what happened to you. But just the idea that there might be more than one emotion happening in that moment.
Yes, because I think what we forget about sexual trauma, particularly when it happens to kids, and the part that nobody ever really wants to talk about, and that really results in a lot of guilt through the years, is if you orgasmed, or if there was this part of you where your body enjoyed it, but your brain didn't, right? So you maybe had an orgasm while it was happening, and then you fantasize about that piece, but it was so traumatic and painful all at the same time. And so that becomes the piece that makes it sometimes so difficult for people, is because maybe the person who was sexually assaulting you, this was time after time after time after time. And maybe there was a part of you that looked forward to it, right? And so it's very difficult in an environment where most sexual assault victims are victimized when they tell the truth. And so it's very difficult for lay people to understand, or people who haven't been sexually victimized, to understand how those two dichotomies can exist together. But if you think about it, like you've got your brain center here, and then you've got your reflexes down here, and the two aren't connected. It's almost like if someone is paraplegic and he can still get an erection, right? And it may not come from his thoughts, but it may come from friction, right? So when someone ejaculates or finds an ounce of pleasure, or even thinks about and replays the event and ruminates and plays it over and over again in their head, if there's any pleasure associated with it, they feel guilty. They hate themselves because of it. How dare you feel that towards the person? How dare you want to be nice to this person? How dare any of that? And so it really creates an ongoing traumatic situation where you have you feel used. You keep being re-victimized and re-traumatized. Whereas what you're talking about, being able to reclaim and find the power in it, oftentimes comes after years of work of forgiving yourself for feeling those things. Forgiving yourself and telling yourself that it's not my fault and this doesn't have anything to do with me. And it's okay that I can find pleasure in any bad situation, and that's okay. And it's also okay if now that piece of pleasure that I find in that situation, that I can then maybe play it out. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of times that's what BDSM is someone reclaiming and reframing their power that was taken away from them in some other shape or form. But that's why the Dr. Rachael Institute is so important, because we help people conceptualize trauma and why it's so difficult for us to move through, and why we have to give ourselves permission to feel what we feel. There's never a situation where you should feel bad about what you feel. It just is. So you experience it and you let it, you recognize it, you say, okay, I'm feeling it again. I'm attracted to this guy again. He looks like him. He even smells like him. He wears the same cologne. Yeah, okay. Well, so what? Okay, so what? You pass it through and you be very, very mindful and present about it, and then you're on to the next thing. And that's how you can kind of circumvent those things and recognize that this is no big deal. It's okay to feel that way. And there are plenty of other people who feel that way too.
Dr. Rachael, I appreciate you so much. I love and adore you. I have for over a decade. And mutual. I just really appreciate you spending time to talk to not only me, but my whole comeback audience, and for everyone who wrote or called in. Thank you. So Dr. Rachael, you have always had so much insight and expertise and compassion for people who are issues with struggling with intimacy, relationships, or just trying to learn how to be a better partner. Thank you so much for everything that you do. You can check out Dr. Rachael and the full podcast on my online home, comeback.tv.